Heat adaptation has been scientifically demonstrated to make you a faster and more efficient runner, both when the weather's cool and especially when it's hot and humid. And when I talk about heat adaptation, I'm not talking about running in the direct heat from the sun. And in fact, to do heat adaptation, you might not even need to run at all. By just being exposed to the heat, whether you're running or not, your body becomes more efficient, which is just crazy to me. For example, one of the many studies that explore this correlation found that sub-elite runners who went in the sauna 3 times a week for 30 minutes improved their 5k times by 2%. For context, if you were a 20-minute 5k runner, that would mean 24 seconds off your 5k time without any extra training. And what's more, it's not about the temperature that you're in, the ambient temperature of the room or the outdoors or whatever, it's about your temperature, your core temperature. That means that you can actually achieve heat adaptation without running in hot conditions, but simply by wearing more layers or turning off the AC or whatever. As I mentioned before, there are a bunch of studies that explore heat adaptation, and while it's well documented, it's certainly not as popular as other sort of environmental training methods such as altitude training. So for me, heat adaptation feels like a bit of an untapped market. So in this video, I want to help change that. In this video, we're going to explore the science of heat adaptation, and we're going to look at practical ways that you can apply it to become a faster and more efficient runner regardless of the weather. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about why heat adaptation is so important, because it is important beyond the obvious performance benefits. And in this modern day, it's becoming ever more important. So regardless of whether you believe it's due to man-made events or some sort of natural phenomenon, the world is objectively getting hotter. There's no debating that. Climate change is happening for whatever reason. And I don't want to get into that, but I do want to say that it's getting hotter. And as a result, marathons around the world are being raced in hotter conditions than ever. The biggest marathons in the world usually take place in either the autumn time or the spring when it's not too cold, but not too hot. And yet, despite that, we've had some unbelievably hot days for some of these races. So London, Manchester marathons this year, Berlin in the autumn time, and Chicago last year, and even doing Extend Chicago this year, were all exceptionally hot and led to conditions that were very unfavorable for performance and dangerous even for many runners. In fact, a friend of mine who ran the Manchester Marathon, a seasoned ultra runner who's ran many marathons, has run many miles, certainly knows how to take care of themselves, was running Manchester Marathon and got to mile 20, passed out, and then woke up at the medical tent. And that was purely due to heat exhaustion. The reality is these races, these events are not going to get cooler. They're only going to get hotter. So for that reason, I think it's important that we start getting used to being in the heat and start getting our body used to being in the heat now. And that's only going to get more important as time goes on. Okay, so what actually is heat adaptation? Heat adaptation is simply training or just existing in hot and humid environments to force physiological changes that make you faster. This process is associated with a bunch of different benefits such as increased plasma volume, lower heart rate at submax effort, improved sweating response, and better thermal comfort and tolerance. There's loads of studies that explore this correlation between heat adaptation and performance increase. One study looked at cyclists and found that 10 days, just 10 days exposed to the heat, led to a 6% increase in a time trial performance versus a control group. And again, heat adaptation is not about running outside in the hot sun. I'm here in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, and it's fucking hot outside. And it's also really humid. I mean, I've got the fan off now because of the sound, but like the ambient temperature is really hot, and probably I'm gaining a little bit of physiological benefit simply by being in this hot, humid environment. Probably get a bit more from running in the sun, but that's absolutely not necessary. It's basically just about getting your core temperature, your personal temperature, as high as possible. So you can kind of mimic heat by like overdressing, just wearing extra layers, or going somewhere where there's not much airflow. Just anything that's going to raise your body temperature. This is also a lot safer because running in the direct sun is dangerous. I've been out running in the sun many times and I've had heat stroke before, and I can tell you it's not fun. So that's what heat adaptation is, but let's look at how and whether it actually works at all. So one thing I just wanted to add, which I didn't talk about in the previous section, which I think is quite interesting, is that against sort of intuitive thinking, when you adapt to the heat, you actually end up sweating more than previously if you hadn't adapted to the heat. Your sweating starts quicker, you sweat more, and that sweat is more diluted, so less electrolytes, more just water. And the reason for that is the quicker that you can sweat, the quicker your body can actually release the heat and help you cool down better. So sweating early is actually a good thing that you want to happen. But I just thought that was interesting because you'd think that someone who was used to being in the heat would actually sweat less, but the opposite is true. Now, the final thing I want to touch on is this notion that you may not even need to exercise in the heat at all. So I want to talk a little bit about those athletic performance improvements and what that actually looks like. I want to talk a little bit about what it actually means to not run in the heat and what the trade-off is of just being in the heat and not running and still getting that heat adaptation. And I also want to talk about how long you should actually be putting yourself under these conditions. How long should you actually adapt to the heat? So let's go through these points one by one. So starting with the athletic performance. There's been a few different meta-analyses done on these. So that means like some scientists have went away and looked at a bunch of different studies, correlated that information, normalized it and said, these are some conclusions we can draw from an array of studies. And essentially, all of these meta-analyses have concluded that heat adaptation does improve athletic performance. So that's the baseline that we're working with. It's just a question of how and to what extent. Basically, heat adaptation improves a bunch of different physiological markers, let's say, which are on the screen now. That includes plasma volume, reduced skin temperature, reduced core temperature, improved sweating, and a bunch of other stuff that ultimately leads to you being a more efficient runner, which means you're a more faster runner. What's interesting about a lot of the studies that are covered in these meta-analyses is that a lot of the sessions that these runners are doing in these studies is actually at low intensities. They're not doing, VO2 max intervals or tempo or threshold runs or anything. It's like easy efforts. And the reason for that primarily is that you can't really run max effort efficiently in heat because that heat is going to reduce your it's going to cap your ability, let's say. What's interesting for you is that it means that if you're doing heat adaptation, you probably don't need to go out there and do your intervals or whatever in the heat. You just need to go out and do, a few easy runs in the heat a couple of times a week, and you will see some very tangible benefits. As I mentioned, you might not even need to run in the heat at all. Right now where I am, which is Caloundra on the sunny coast in Queensland, Australia, it's 27 degrees, feels like 30, and it's fucking hot. And the thing is, when you are exposed to these conditions for a prolonged period, your body just naturally adapts. That's obviously why people who live in these sorts of conditions, especially people who live in sort of Asia or hotter places like that where it's hot all year round, are used to it and can tolerate that heat a lot more than tourists who are not used to it. It's not just because of predetermined genetic things, it's because their body's used to being in those conditions. And as we discussed at the top of the video, this is all backed up by science. So one study looked at sub-elite endurance athletes. They put them in a sauna at 89 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, and found how their performance in a time trial compared to the control group who didn't use the sauna. And what they found is that they had a 1.9% improvement in their 5K time, which, as we've already said, if you're a 20-minute 5K runner, that's like 24 seconds off your personal best. The benefits are probably due to one of the other scientific metrics that we've already discussed, such as increased blood volume. Now, what's particularly interesting is that that's already pretty decent gains if you're just an average runner, but these were sub-elite runners, and they concluded that elite runners wouldn't see quite as much benefit, but we can sort of extrapolate and assume that more average runners would probably see a larger benefit, so you might expect to see gains more than 2% if you are not a sub-elite runner. Again, in the interest of extrapolation, though I haven't actually tested this in any scientific way, I would argue that potentially other hot environments like hot yoga might offer similar benefits to being in the sauna, because although the ambient temperature in a hot yoga studio isn't quite as hot as a sauna, you're actually moving, and therefore your core temperature, which like we've said is the only thing that actually matters, might get to a temperature that's comparable to what it would be if you were static in a sauna. But that's untested, that's just me theorizing, but I definitely think that there would be some benefits to going to a hot yoga class that would translate to your endurance performance. With all that in mind, though, the thing is, although you will see some benefits, and quite a lot of benefits probably from being passive in heat, you wouldn't see as much as you would from actually exercising in the heat or running in the heat. And that's probably due to the principle of specificity, which basically says that the more that you want to train for a certain thing, the more you should train as closely to that as possible. So if you want to run in the heat, the best thing to do is to train in the heat and actually run in the heat. Being in the heat will get you part of the way there, but if you want that last 20-30% or whatever, you're going to actually have to run. So if you can't run in the heat, or it's just impossible for whatever reason, then exposure's, it's something, and it's definitely useful. But training with a high core body temperature is absolutely the best case scenario if you're training for an event. that is in the heat. Now, the final point is, how long should you actually train in the heat? There's a chart on the screen now that's going to show the benefit that you might expect over a given period of time. So if you've done this, please let me know in the comments how you've got on. Let me know your thoughts. If you disagree, let me know as well. And if you're interested in more videos like this, we've got a whole bunch of science, running oriented content out now and coming later. So please subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you in the next one.